Today is Friday, August 2nd, 2019. My name is Judy Herrera, and I'm in Camarillo, California. It is my honor and pleasure to interview Ron Cattanach on behalf of the Conejo Valley chapter of the DAR and Colonial Dames 17th Century for the Veterans History Project for the Library of Congress. This interview is being recorded by Ed Lynch from Advanta Videography and contains the reflections and memories of the veteran during his time in the Army. This is Ron's story. Ron, you're third generation, born in California, the second son of Erwin Cattanach and Edith Philby. Sadly, your mom passed away the following year, and your father would remarry in 1947. You attended Birmingham Junior and Senior High Schools in Van Nuys, California. You weren't too interested in the book learning part of school, but excelled at typing. After 3 years, you could type 53 correct words a minute. You also had a paper route after school that kept you busy. After high school, you had no desire to go to college and decided to enlist in the Army. Do you want to pick up your story there?
Sure. I thought I would like to operate heavy equipment. So when I enlisted, I was told that I could go to heavy equipment school in Fort Belvoir, Virginia. So that was, that's what I figured I would be doing. So I wind up first week of boot camp, which is 0 week.
Okay.
I think I was probably 3 or 4 days into it when I got an infection in my elbow, and I wound up in the hospital. So that put me back about 6 weeks.
Oh gosh, where were you at this time? Where'd you do boot camp?
Fort Ord.
Okay, California.
Fort Ord, California. Okay. So when I finally got to another unit and went through boot camp, I had missed the class.
Oh.
So rather than having them set me up in another class, they sent me to Fort Riley, Kansas to get on-the-job training.
Okay.
So here I'm thinking that I'm going to go to Fort Riley and I'm going to learn how to operate bulldozers and graders and what have you. And instead, they taught me how to drive a 2.5-ton fuel truck.
Oh, well, let's go back to boot camp. What was that like for you, other than being in the hospital, which had to have been an awful experience?
I don't remember a lot about it, so I guess it was just, pretty much you had to stay on post till open house, which
Okay.
I don't remember exactly how many weeks into boot camp that was, and then the weekend of your open house, you got your first pass.
Oh.
And you could go, I forget how many miles away from the post. So my mom and dad came to the open house.
Oh, nice.
And then we went to Santa Cruz. And I know we were supposed to wear our uniforms all the time we were on this leave. And my mom and dad had brought some street clothes for me, and we went fishing.
Oh.
And when I got back to the base, somebody asked me, "Were you in Santa Cruz?" Yeah. I said, "I thought that was you, but I didn't recognize you because you didn't have a uniform on." So, but anyway, nothing became of that. So, but otherwise, I don't really remember a lot about
Well, not too
basic
rigorous.
training.
You're in good shape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I had no, repercussions from the surgery or anything like that, other than just a ugly scar.
Oh gosh.
But
How did you get to Fort Riley then from California? Because Kansas.
Train.
A train. Oh gosh.
which was boring. Take a train across. I don't know what you go through. Arizona, all the boring states.
So after 40 some hours, you finally arrived in Fort Riley?
Fort Riley.
Okay.
Yeah. Went to my unit. somebody had to have met me at main post where the train would go through, but I don't remember really anything about it other than, I wound up 1st Engineer Battalion.
1st Engineer. So the train actually went right to Fort Riley.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it does.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it runs right through the post. And so how did you keep in touch with family when you were that far
Just
away?
letters.
Letters, yeah.
I don't think I made very many phone calls.
Yeah. And you didn't leave a girl or anything behind, so you were...
I can't remember. I don't believe so.
Okay. So what was food like when you got there?
In Fort Riley?
Uh-huh.
It was fine.
Yeah.
There were obviously things that I didn't care for, but I never cared for them before, squash and some vegetables and that, but for the most part, the food was okay. One of the things I liked that a lot of other people didn't like was the SOS, which, I thought it was pretty good, get nice soggy bread and that, I thought it was okay.
So you want to explain a little bit to those of us who don't know what SOS is? What does that mean?
Well, there's a couple different ways to fix it. I think they used ground meat.
Okay.
So it's ground meat in gravy on toast. And the SOS is
Oh,
It's okay. You're good.
shit on a shingle.
oh, okay.
This is a private video.
Okay. But I rather enjoyed it. But other people make it with just chipped beef in gravy.
Okay,
And
that makes sense. So what exactly did you do day to day? Run us through a day. What did you do?
well, you get up. Somebody comes in the barracks and hollers that it's time to get up. And so you get up and shower and get out for reveille. Shower and shave. Get out for reveille. And this could have been probably 7:30 in the morning, something like that. Go to breakfast. And then just start my day. If I had equipment out somewhere on the base that I had to go fuel up, I would go down to the motor pool. They'd march us down to the motor pool because in the barracks, besides myself, there were all the mechanics, guys that worked in the parts room. There was probably, I'm going to guess, there are probably 25 to 35 people that we would march down to the motor pool.
Okay.
And that's where I had my truck, and all the mechanics, they had all their toolboxes and so forth.
So you were hauling diesel in your truck?
Yes.
Diesel. Okay. And about how much would your truck hold, would you say?
1,200 gallons.
Oh boy, okay. Okay. And other things that you did besides that?
Well, we might, if we were really lucky, we might have police call where you would walk through an area and pick up anything that wasn't attached to the ground. Cigarette butts, paper, whatever.
And I know Kansas has different weather than California, so...
Oh, they have weather.
So
We don't have weather. They have weather.
So tell us a little bit about different weather and
Well,
how that would impact your job.
I, born and raised in California, I had heard about humidity, but I really wasn't familiar with it. But I became very familiar with humidity. You take a shower, dry off, walk to your bunk, dry off again, put your clothes on, try and find a breeze somewhere, and and you just sweat. Sweat, sweat, sweat. And then we had winter, which is snow starts usually around Thanksgiving, and it lasts through probably March, and for the most part, it stays on the ground, and the wind blows. So when there's no wind and it might be 40 degrees out, you're running around in shirt sleeves or maybe a really light jacket, and along comes about a 35, 40 mile an hour wind, and you can't, well, for me anyway, put enough clothes on to get comfortable. I never did learn to layer. But during the snowy months, it was our responsibility to put sand on the roads around the base. So we would always have somebody in some piece of equipment that I would have to go fuel up.
And then what did you do when you had off time? What did you do when?
Well, there was a dam called Tuttle Creek Dam, and a lake that we used to go swimming. I had a car, and I was one of the few guys in the barracks that had a car. So I always had people that wanted to go with me, and I didn't buy very much gas when I was in the service. I always had guys that would, fill the tank up for me. But we would go to Tuttle Creek. We took a couple of trips to Topeka, and we'd go into town and have a beer or two or three. And we would do things on the base. There was our area had a swimming pool.
Nice.
They had a theater. They had an enlisted man's club.
Oh.
So, you just find things. Somebody says, "Hey, let's do this." Well, that sounds good. Okay, let's do it. And
so, tell us a little bit about maneuvers, and you had to go to a different
the only
state.
one that I really remember, they flew us to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and it was our job to create an airfield. So they put all our equipment in C-130s. My fuel truck was in one with a Jeep. I do not remember where they landed us at, somewhere in Missouri, and then we convoyed to this area and we built a landing strip. So bulldozers and all of that, they trucked over, and graders and what have you, and we built a landing strip. Eventually the C-130s were landing there.
So we didn't really talk about you when you enlisted. It was 1962.
Yeah.
So it's pretty much Cold War time. So
Yes.
they're probably having you do this in anticipation to be a readiness.
I think it was just, you were always doing, especially the infantry, which, I wasn't in, but they were always on maneuvers someplace. But for us, it was just, I think, every so often we had to do something to show that we were able to do it. And
Right, and in case you got called to do it,
Right,
you
yeah.
could building an airstrip is a pretty massive job. How long were you in Leonard Wood? Do you remember about how long you would have been there?
I'm sure at least a week.
Okay.
And then we convoyed back to Fort Riley.
Oh boy, slow,
Yeah.
slow going. You mentioned when we had talked earlier about scissor bridges. You want to explain a little bit about what that was about?
Okay. They would take tanks and convert them to deploy these scissor bridges, which would they would fold up like scissors, and then this tank would put them out, and they would be pointed at the ground, and then they would open up, and then they would sit them down. And I'm just guessing they were probably 60 to 80 feet long when they were opened up.
Wow.
And when they were hauling them, they just were attached to the top of the old tank. In other words, it didn't have a gun on it anymore.
Right.
It had machinery that would hold this bridge.
Transfer. Yeah.
And we had at least two, and there could have been more. There were two brothers, twin brothers, which was kind of unusual in the service. They each had one.
Oh.
And I trying to remember if there were others. There could have been, but I don't. I just remember those two.
I just have a miscellaneous question. I'm intrigued about the scissor bridge.
I know. Right?
Okay.
And when they deployed those, was the tank part of the support structure
No.
for that?
It just, there was, as I recall, there was an arm that picked this up, and somehow it would close the bridge up, and then the arm would bring it down, and it would, I don't know if it rested on top of the tank or if it just was, off a little bit. But when they opened it up and set it down, then the tank arm would detach and pretty much drive anything over it, bulldozers,
Wow.
whatever. Yeah, they were
Heavy
So they were-
duty.
pretty massive, really.
They were, was this big enough to deploy across a river or just small?
They were, as I recall, they were probably 60, 70. In other words, when they were on top of the tank, folded up, they were probably 30, 35 or so feet long. Longer than the tank.
So would it fit over a river or
Sure.
fit? Wow.
Sure. If you had a bank on the other side, something to
So
sit
these were
it
not,
on.
these were not part of a pontoon bridge, because I've seen
No,
different things about the way they deploy the pontoon bridges and things like that.
no, these were just,
Individual
there weren't any,
units.
now, I don't think they could have put pontoons on them. I never saw pontoons on them.
Interesting, yeah. Well, it's amazing the stuff they could do though.
I know.
It's,
Yeah.
yeah, you think about it, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. Especially when you think about, like, we had just come out of Korea in World War II, so, that's what they do, blow up a bridge so that you can't
Sure.
get across.
Oh,
so
yeah.
if you had the ability to go across,
Train
Without
trestles and bridges and sure.
that's a good
Sure.
thing.
Well, they couldn't get anywhere without fuel, that's for sure.
I know.
No.
It's important. As much as
Except the tanks used gasoline, so that wasn't
Oh,
that
okay.
wasn't me.
but still, the diesel's important. Be able to get it around.
Yeah. opportunity once to ride in a tank, and that was some experience.
Yeah.
They go over everything, trees, you name it. Nothing. They wanted to drive through a house, they'd go through a house. It was amazing what those things were. Yeah,
Big battering ram.
yeah, it was. I mean, you're inside, and if you don't have the hatch up, you're looking out through mirrors and that. You're not really. You don't look out and really see anything. It's a series of mirrors that you're looking at. So it would take some training to be able to drive one of those things.
Almost like a video game.
Yeah,
Probably.
yeah. It was.
I just saw something. I read something about the riskiest thing about a tank driver in Vietnam was knocking down a tree and having a nest of red ants fall on the tank. And apparently that was a pretty common experience over there. I was just
Wow.
thinking, whoa,
Where do you go?
who would ever imagine that that's what you were faced with?
Right, and how could you get away from that?
Kind of along those lines, we had a bulldozer working out. I think I mentioned Camp Moon Lake in Kansas on the base. He was out working, and so I was taking fuel out to him. And when I got there, he's standing off the bulldozer. He's just as white as can be. And he'd uncovered a den of copperheads. And he could hardly talk. They were everywhere. They were all over the bulldozer. They were everywhere. And you don't think about these things.
Right.
And but he.
So what did you guys do?
Well, they were pretty much gone by the time I got there, but he was still shaken up, and he didn't get bit or anything, but it had to be freaky scary.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to get too close to any of that stuff.
No.
Even
no.
though you think they're gone.
Yeah, no.
Wow.
Wow. Let's go back to military service. There was a inspection that you had mentioned earlier, where you were talking about
The tire.
Yeah, that was a good story.
So we were having an inspection, and it was a big one. It wasn't just a lot of. We had inspections all the time, and it was usually just the company commander or someone within the battalion would come and look at whatever. They'd inspect the barracks, they'd inspect your equipment at where you worked and that. But this one was a division inspection, and so you were in a building, and you're standing by your vehicle, and there's somebody going all over it, looking at things, and they're telling somebody that is writing things down what's wrong with it. So the guy that was doing the inspection took a tire gauge and he was checking the tires, and he told the fellow writing down that there's a flat tire. So I knew the tire wasn't flat, and I questioned it, and you're not supposed to do that. And I told him that I don't think it's a flat tire. You don't need a tire gauge to tell a tire is flat. So I lost a stripe over that, the only one I had.
Oh. So you were just feeling like the Army was not for you. At that point, you were responsible for 2 trucks, right? You had 2.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
At one point they thought that I was capable enough, they gave me another truck, which that one hauled gasoline,
Okay.
not diesel fuel, but that wasn't very long. I don't think more than a month or two that I had that. I don't even think they kept the truck. It went somewhere else.
Mm.
I don't know how we wound up with it in the first place. It hadn't been there. It just arrived and was there for a short time, and then it was gone.
Okay. So whatever happened with your heavy equipment work? What? Because that
My
was
training.
Yeah.
I think that slipped through the cracks somewhere. When I had less than a year, and they approached me in the orderly room. I don't know if it was my first sergeant or company commander or who, but they wanted to know if I still wanted to go to school.
Of course.
And I, well, sure.
Yeah.
And well, they would send me to school. The only problem was when I was finished with school, I would have to have at least 2 years active duty left, which I said, no, I'm not interested. And then I don't know which came first, that or an offer to go learn to fly helicopters, which same thing. You would become a warrant officer, so you have to go through that school. Then you go through helicopter training, and when you're done, you have to have a certain amount of time left. And for some reason, I think it was more than 2 years that you had to have, maybe 3, when you were done. And so again, I thought, no, I don't. And at the time, I was just thinking of the time that I would have to be in. I was ready to get out.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever realized that I'd probably go to Vietnam. Vietnam wasn't really a big deal at that time,
Right.
but I think helicopter pilots would have been in demand in Vietnam.
Had you stayed much longer. Were you able to go home on leave any of the time you were at Fort Riley, Kansas?
I think I went home twice. Once by train, back and forth, and once I flew.
So you want to tell us a little bit about how that went?
Well, the train ride was long and boring, and the one by plane, I flew from Manhattan, Kansas to Denver, Colorado on standby.
Okay.
So when I got to Denver, I don't recall the airline that I was on, but I had a piece of paper that I had to give them to show that I was flying standby and so forth. So I'm the first one there. I put my paper on the desk, and I don't remember, a couple hours later, they start calling off names of people flying standby, which was all military at the time.
And you were in uniform, right?
You had to be in uniform. So they never called my name. So I went up and I questioned it and said I was the first one here, but why didn't I get called? And they looked through the stack of papers, and here I am on the bottom.
Oh.
So first one there was the last one that would have been called, so I didn't get called. But I remember Continental Airlines would honor the ticket from this other airline. So the next day, I got on a flight to go home.
Oh, nice.
So it was about probably the same amount of time as it would have taken to take the train.
Oh gosh. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about your having a car and what happened to the car while you were on base?
Well, my first car was a 52 Chevy, which I bought in Junction City, Kansas. And for entertainment or whatever, there was another fella and I that he had a car also. We would take the mufflers off and go ride around on the tank trails, and we did that quite a bit. And then we did it once, and it was really cold, so I didn't put the muffler back on, and apparently it warped the valves, and it didn't run right after that.
Oh.
So somebody in the barracks offered to fix it, and it was around $100 to fix it. He used to go to the garage on Main Post and work on cars, and so he said he would do it, and I didn't have the money.
Yeah.
So there was a fella that lived off post with a family, and he didn't have a car, so I gave it to him, and then he paid the other guy to fix it for him. So then I was without a car for, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 months. I don't remember exactly, and I missed it. I missed a car, so I found a '57 Ford that somebody in the unit had, and at the time it wasn't running. The transmission was shot in it, and it was at somebody's house off the base. So I bought it and put the transmission in it, and I had that car for, well, till probably a year or so after I got out. It was a nice car, well, pretty reliable if you didn't try and spin the tires, because it had been an automatic and somebody converted it to a stick shift. And
So on military pay, how are you saving money to buy a car? I'm just curious.
savings bonds.
Okay.
$50 bond was $37.50.
Okay.
So each month there would be a bond sent to my father. So I don't remember. You couldn't cash them right away. They had to. I don't know how long you had to wait, but you didn't have to wait till they were worth $50. That was, I don't know, 7 years or something like that. So I would get a hold of my dad and let him know to send me
Cash them in.
some money. Yeah, cash a few in, send me some money, and it was generally for a car. You know,
Okay. That was a
I
good
don't
way to
remember.
save
I don't
money.
remember really getting them for anything else.
Yeah, that was a good way to save money.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then-
When I got out, I don't remember. I had a few left when I got out, but most of them were gone.
So let's go back to job responsibilities. Did you ever have more responsibilities than there? Besides just fueling up the tank, they added some job responsibilities.
I had one of the fellas in the barracks was due to get out, so he had had the truck before me.
Okay.
But then they left him doing getting oil and grease and things like that, along with, I don't remember what else he did, but anyway, at some point they decided that I should do that also. So I had to pick up oil in 55-gallon drums and five-gallon buckets of grease and anything else they needed for petroleum oils and lubricants.
So what kind of machinery would need that kind of stuff? I mean, could you?
Anything. You know, any heavy equipment would need oil. Grease them, just like you would grease a car.
So you would bring it to the mechanics who would be doing
Correct.
that job.
Correct.
Okay. And so this base is an infantry base, the big red one, right?
Right.
And they would have all this heavy equipment that needed the diesel
We
or
were
the oil.
support. Yeah.
Okay. So at the end of your time, and you decided not to re-enlist and do, spend 2 more years. When did you get out, and how did you get home?
I drove home.
Oh.
I got out. They paid me, I believe I had almost a month of leave that I had accrued, so they paid me that, and then mustering out pay. I forget what it was, but anyway, when I left home or left to go home, I had about $300 in my pocket.
Nice. Okay, and this is 1965 now.
Yes.
Okay.
And I met my dad in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and he rode home with me, and I think it was his last ditch effort to try and get me to go to college, and didn't work. I just never did. I never went
Sorry,
to college.
Dad.
Yeah, sorry, but I think he was proud of what I became and what I did, and I think he was afraid that I don't know, that I wouldn't be anything. So.
Oh. So what did you do?
You always want your kids to be more than you.
Always, right?
Yeah.
So what did you do when you got back to California?
I went to work for a friend of the family that owned an insulation business, and that entailed crawling around in an attic, dragging a hose with you, blowing insulation in an attic. I did that for probably, I'm going to guess 5-6 months, and pretty much until winter came along, and then it dried up. There's no work in the winter. And so then I went to work for the phone company, GTE, for about, I'm guessing, maybe 3 months, and I decided that that wasn't for me. At least what I was doing wasn't anything that really interested me. And so then I went to work for the gas company, and I was there for about 28 years.
And originally, what did they need? Where did your high school typing come in?
Where did it come in?
Or yes.
I started out as a business major, and I was a business major until I decided that I didn't care for bookkeeping. So then I just went to, I think it was just a general education major. And the typing I continued because it was I forget what kind of an art they called it, but you had to have something like that. So I just stayed with it.
So when the gas company called you for that first job, when they telegrammed you the job that was available,
Yes.
what was that?
File clerk.
And they needed you to
They
be...
needed, you didn't type very much, but they just wanted to make sure that you could type without looking at the keys. And so if you could do that, you were pretty much in, because I think you only had to type like 30 words a minute, something like that, which was, I think I really impressed her, the lady.
And rightly so.
And I did that. I was a file clerk for probably, well, not even 3 months, because I never finished probation, and I bid out into another department, become a serviceman.
So if looking back, if you had to think back what your takeaway from your time in the military was, or how it impacted your life after, what would you have to say?
Well, it was something that you had to do. I was young, naive, but I knew that it was probably be wise to get it out of the way. I'm glad I did it. I met a lot of nice people, made some friends that, as it turns out, were longtime friends. I found one about 40 or 45 years later in upstate New York that we just, lost touch. You get out and you have a life, you get you know, eventually you get married and have work and kids and so forth, so you lose touch. But I had a lot of good experiences, and you know, I realized that what I really went in for, I didn't get. So I think that was a learning experience.
Yes. Very disappointing, I'm sure. And you want to talk a little bit about the 60s and the draft and how that, trying to get a job then, for you already having served, it probably was
made it easier. You know, that was two things out of the way right off the bat. And at that time, for what I was interested in, you didn't need college, you know, though I could find work.
Because they knew that your draft status, you had already served.
Correct.
That made it easier. Okay. Anything else that you want to share that we hadn't brought up about your time in the military or how it impacted your life afterwards?
Well, as I tell people, had I gone to school, learned to operate heavy equipment, I never would have met my wife.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
So that was probably the best thing that ever came out of it.
Well, you want to share a little bit then? How did you meet your wife?
Well, I was working for the gas company, and they paid all right, but it wasn't, you weren't going to get rich. So any overtime that was available, they knew they could count on me.
Oh.
So I had worked a late shift on a weekend, and I got home at probably 11 or 12 at night, and there was a party going on in the apartment building. So I went over, and my wife, future wife, was there with three of her roommates, and they hadn't lived there very long, because that was the first time I met her.
Okay. Yay. And if you'd been working heavy equipment, you couldn't do that at night.
Who knows where you, well, no, I'm just meaning, who knows where you'd be if you got a job with a large company like Granite or one of those. You could be in a foreign country, or who knows where.
Military is a unique experience. There's nothing else like it that I know of.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. And it changes everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah. I don't see how you could experience it and not be changed.
No, especially when you're young,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, and impressionable.
Well, and you weren't sure what you wanted to do with your life, so it was an avenue.
I thought, well, to this day, when we drive by construction sites and that, I don't tell my wife, don't those guys look like they're having fun out there? Don't they look like they're having fun moving that dirt around?
Oh.
I told her, if you ever want to really get me a really super duper birthday present, get me a pile of dirt and a tractor and let me move it around.
Skip loader, yeah.
Yeah. Probably would have worked a few years ago, not so much now.
No, I don't know. You could still do it.
Good. Well, we thank you for your service. It was important that you were there for us in that time period. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Right. Yes,
we
thank
really
you very
appreciate
much.
the time you've given us and your story today.
Bye.